Hello, I'm Chris Tozy, and I'm a musician living in San Francisco.
Evening falls through the walls. I'll hear it rain, hear it strain.
I'm Kate Van Horn. I'm a musician and I live in Santa Rosa, California.
I would describe my music style as a space rock opera, kind of instrumental music that has rock melodies with theatrical aspects.
My musical style is definitely pop, influenced by jazz, classical music, and poetry. Music is everything to me. Music is so important in my life. If I couldn't play music, I don't know why I would go on living.
Music to me is life. To some people it's sounds or songs, but to me, music is everything.
The best part about being a musician is definitely all of the connections I have made with other people. I have made some friends that I never ever could have imagined making.
I wake up and I'm working on something that I believe in and I truly love every day. I would say probably the very first time I heard music, I knew I wanted to be a musician. It was my father's record of Frank Zappa. It has all these mixtures of guitar and talking and theatrical stuff and everything that has shaped my music the way it is today.
There was never a time in my life that I can remember not wanting to be a musician and not being a musician actively. My mom always sang with us and I was always drawn to a piano if there was one in the room. Being a musician is hard. There really aren't many things about it that are easy. It takes up so much of my time, so much of my money. It's hard.
The hardest part of being a musician is you do this for yourself, but at some point there has to be some kind of validation that comes from the public. I've not been to China or Xinjiang before.
I've never been to China and I've never been to Xinjiang.
I do not even know what to expect, but I'm excited about it.
We're going to Xinjiang for 2 weeks. We're going to be meeting professional musicians as well as folk artists in the villages.
I look forward to the whole experience.
It's going to be tremendous. Today was my first day in Urumqi, which is the capital of Xinjiang. In the morning, we visited the Yanghang Mosque, which in Chinese means overseas banks. It's located in an area of the city where a lot of banks and embassies used to be located, so that's why it's called the Yanghang Mosque.
The mosque was built in 1897 by donations and is 100 years old. It has over 30,000 square feet.
It was incredibly beautiful on the outside, very ornate, and the colors were just very calming but very beautiful at the same time. The mosque was located in an area of the city that is very bustling.
There's highways and high-rises everywhere, and it's quite a contrast to the spirituality that's going on inside.
Women are not usually allowed in the mosque, so it was a great opportunity for me to go into a mosque.
As we approached the mosque, we had to take our shoes off. This was my first time to ever be in a mosque, so just to see the layout of where you could see where the people would stand, and that it held 3 balconies. I believe it held over 1,000 people that would worship at one time.
The carpeting on the floor was beautiful. Most of it was green with patterns in it, but there were a number of carpets around the outside edge of the green, which was the main floor, and they were all different kinds of carpets.
As we looked up, there's chandeliers, beautiful chandeliers and ornate writing and colors, really amazing.
Imagine 1,000 people praying in there. It must be so moving.
In the afternoon, we were able to visit a Uyghur performance group that we were invited to watch, and basically we were overwhelmed by new musicianship, new musical instruments, and an orchestrated sound that I'd never heard before.
I was so surprised because I've never heard this music before. I never even knew the Uyghur people existed. And it's shocking to me that I didn't, because their voices are so powerful and clear, and the way the instruments sound is just, it's so moving. The song was introduced by a melody line on an instrument similar to a guitar. One of the singers came down off the riser and stood front and center in the middle of the room and sang a melody in unison with the guitar that was playing. And his voice was very clear, very pure, very loud for being 20, 30 feet away from me. He had the best expression on his face. He just seemed so calm and so relaxed.
Part of the music is that there's dancers that are involved with this, and so we were able to see one of the dancers.
The way their skirts move and the way their hair spins around them is just moving.
I had seen musicians that I want to aspire to be like. These guys probably don't get the credit they deserve, and they are the top 1%. You can definitely tell this is their life, their passion, and you can feel it, you can hear it. This instrument's called the kalum. It is very interesting to me because it seems to be the lead piece in the whole band. I hear the highest melodies, and it reminds me of a lead guitar, which I play. We got to basically try a couple. It was a great experience that we'd never get a chance to ever have without coming here.
This instrument is the sitar. It impressed me for a few different reasons. The first reason is that it has only one string that is played, and it has a bunch of strings that aren't played at all, which I think is very interesting. And I also liked that the performer's father was a famous sitar player as well. I got to play one of the instruments, which was amazing. It was hard, but it was beautiful. I never even knew this music existed, and it's so beautiful and so amazing.
So coming over here and experiencing other music and other musicians, it's very overwhelming. I left there feeling very excited about my own music, about their music.
Overall, this first day in Urumqi has been mind-blowing. It's shocking to me that I never heard this music before. It's very disappointing. But on the upside, I've heard it now. And I'm excited. I think that it's going to have a really strong impact on my writing.
Blown away by the musicianship and the abilities of every person in the whole ensemble. Watching them perform and then getting to interact with them and grab their instruments and use them and have them show us how to use them was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is a highlight of my life.
Today was our second day in Urumqi, and in the morning we visited a workshop where the traditional Uyghur instruments are handmade.
We walked down a small alleyway of the basic two-room shop.
There was a man sitting at the end of the alley, wet sanding. We were able to ask him a few questions about what he was doing. He told us that he had been making instruments for over 10 years. The instrument he was working on takes about 20 days to finish it, and it was about 3 days away from being finished. It already had the bone inlay in it. Then we went inside the shop. It was very small, somewhat cramped.
As we talked to them, we found out the father had done this over 50 years, and he is 61 years old. And his son, who is 30, has done this over 20 years. So they've both been doing this since they were 10 years old.
We learned that his father had learned from his father, and we learned that it's passed down from generation to generation.
We found out that there was 8 members involved total, and that each person kind of had their own role in the making of the instruments. But basically they were passing down the techniques. So each individual could make the instrument if they wanted to, but they all played a certain role in the whole process of how the finished product was made. His son was carving out the instrument.
And he had basically the rough shape of the guitar-like instrument, and he set it down in some worn depressions on the bench he was working on.
If he makes a mistake, the instrument is ruined.
As he was chopping away, the chips accumulated inside the body, and you could smell the wood sort of wafting up out, and it was very sweet and very lovely.
This whole process takes a total of 20 days just to hollow out the body. He was taking the tuning pegs and actually sanding them down so they could fit perfectly.
Two of them actually sat down and performed a few songs for us. It was very entertaining, and the songs they played sounded very traditional, like a drone underneath with a melody line moving over it. Pretty simple melodies, but really great rhythms. It really got my foot tapping. the afternoon, we visited the bazaar, or market. They had all different kinds of things there.
From silk scarves to vases, herbs, medicine.
Raisins and dates and nuts and furs and jewelry.
As well as musical instruments. The layout was very narrow. When negotiating, the locals had calculators and they would type in the exact amount that they wanted, show it to me, and then they would hand me the calculator and I would punch in another number, give it back to them, and then they would hand it back or shake their head. So it was kind of a process of back and forth, back and forth.
The shopkeeper, who was a Uyghur woman, grabbed a scarf off the rack and wrapped it around my neck, and I knew immediately that I had to have it. It was gorgeous. And about 15 minutes of negotiating, I finally got it for a really great price, about $15 US, which we would never be able to get it for that price at home. So it was a great afternoon. Today we had the opportunity to drive about 40 miles south of the city of Urumqi to Nanshang Mountain, which is over 5,000 feet above sea level.
We got to see a lot of farmland, a lot of beautiful sights, and coming up the mountain we saw the lake, and definitely rivals any kind of scenery that you see in California.
When we left the city, it was warm, and as we were winding our way up the narrow mountain roads, the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. It was much cooler up in the mountains. There were about 200 sheep grazing by a lake.
We met the Kazakh people. The Kazakh people live in yurts, which are tent-like structures.
The scenery around the yurt is very dull. The colors are dull greens, dark greens. The rocks are very gray. Before we went in, we were greeted by several members of the settlement. Walking into the yurt was similar to, it was like being a character in the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where everything is made of candy and it's very colorful. It was just dazzling.